Again, in looking at in the financial performance of the firms of endearment, as I mentioned earlier, they outperformed the market dramatically by a 9-to-1 ratio over the 10-year period from 1996 to 2006. And they have also significantly outpaced the market since. We have been tracking them in subsequent years as well. One of the other interesting comparisons that we thought we would do was with the companies that are in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, which has been a very influential book in corporate America and in the world, in fact, and one of the, I think, the second best-selling business book of all time now after In Search of Excellence. Those books, or rather the companies in Good to Great, were selected purely on one criteria, and that was financial returns. So the criteria was that the companies outperformed the market 3-to-1 over a 14-year period, at least 3-to-1 over at least 14 years. And so they looked at the universe of publicly traded companies over the last 7 or 8 decades, and they distilled it down to 11 companies that met those two criteria. And then they describe what were the factors that caused them to go from average performance or good performance to suddenly great performance and sustaining it over that period of time. And they talked about leadership issues and so forth. When we looked at those companies and we looked at the criteria, we said, first of all, that seems to be a rather narrow way to define greatness, that you simply are looking at one stakeholder. What if you're delivering those outsized returns, but you're also at the same time having certain negative effects? How do you account for that? So, for example, Philip Morris or Altria is one of those companies that was cited as great by those criteria, and perhaps financially you could make that case. But we said, what if you look at the net impact on society of a tobacco business? This is the world's largest, one of the world's, maybe China tobacco might be larger, but certainly historically this has been one of the leaders in the tobacco industry. What's their net impact on the world? Is the world a better place because that company exists? Right? Would the world miss that company were it not to exist tomorrow? Right? So if you ask those kinds of tough questions, then you start to say, well, maybe it's not that great for all of us, that particular business. Yeah, it's true, millions of people are addicted on tobacco and et cetera, but so in that sense they're meeting their desires, but is it something that is ultimately good for us, and are they doing responsible things in terms of moving people away from that, etc. So again, without delving too much into Philip Morris, the question really is, how do you define greatness? And to us, greatness is a company that actually is a company that is good for the world, that would be missed if it does not exist anymore, that creates value on a sustained basis for all of its stakeholders, figures out how to align their interests together, distributes that value in an equitable and fair manner over time, and creates a variety of different kinds of non-financial wealth and well-being as well. So we have a much more expansive view and definition of greatness compared. Now, of course, what we found was that the companies in the Good to Great book in that 10-year period returned about 336%, whereas the firms of endearment returned about 1,100%. So even on the financial criteria, these companies outperformed those companies that were selected purely on financial criteria, right? While these companies, we argue, and by the way, the Circuit City and I think Fannie Mae were also part of that set of great companies. Now, of course, their period of greatness may not have coincided because, that 14-year period may have occurred, in the 70s, for example. But our perspective is that a company, it has to be part of its DNA, the way that it operates, and that has to be sustainable. Companies need to figure out a way to continue to operate in a certain way over time and be adaptable and so forth to changing circumstances. So that's a slightly different perspective on what it means to be greatness, and also to be great as a business, and also looking at non-financial criteria in terms of defining that.